Leading off our discussion tonight, our Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings of Florida. She's a member of the House Intelligence Committee and the House Judiciary Committee, and she has taken part in all of the public impeachment hearings. Also joining us, Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney from the Northern District of Alabama and an MSNBC legal analyst, and Ron Klain, former senior aide to Vice President Joe Biden and President Obama and former chief counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee. He is an advisor to Joe Biden's 2020 presidential campaign. Congresswoman Demings, thank you very much for joining us after this very, very busy week. What do you believe are the next steps for the Intelligence Committee? Will there be more witness interviews and depositions or public testimony?
Well, Lawrence, it's good to be with you. And let me just say today, we heard from two very powerful witnesses, as you've already talked about. What a way to finish the week. Today was really the last day of scheduled witnesses. You know, we'll regroup next week and talk about the steps moving forward. But I believe what we have heard from these very courageous, very dedicated Foreign Service officers who, as you've indicated, felt a moral obligation or a duty to do the right thing has been their testimony. The evidence against the president is overwhelming and pretty clear and convincing. Now,
you are one of those people who's on both committees. What has the Judiciary, the House Judiciary Committee, been doing while the House Intelligence Committee has been conducting these hearings?
Well, I believe the Judiciary Committee under Chairman Nadler's leadership have been, of course, watching these hearings by the Intelligence Committee very, very closely, because they would be responsible for reviewing every piece of testimony, every piece of documentation, including text messages, emails, and other pieces of documentation, so they can begin the critical work, or we can begin the critical work of writing articles of impeachment. And so I am sure Chairman Nadler has been meeting with his lawyers and staff members and members of the committee having those discussions.
Joyce Vance, what did you see in the evidence established today that could add to an article of impeachment?
You know, I think the articles have been pretty well defined as we headed into this week, Lawrence. And what happened today was evidence that made it very clear that Democrats have headed the right direction. So when Dr. Hill testifies that she realized after some interaction with Gordon Sondland that he was running a domestic political errand, which I think was her very polite way of saying a bribery scam, it really brought home that the Democrats have developed sufficient evidence to charge some form of bribery or extortion, along with contempt of Congress and perhaps other articles of impeachment.
Ron Klain, I want to come back to the oath of office that these witnesses took, that we saw really on vivid display today. And those of us, everyone on this panel has taken that oath of office, and most of us never get tested on it the way they got tested on it today. Most of us never have that moment where we literally have to step up to the battle line to defend the Constitution the way they did today. What was it like for you to watch them raise their right hand, step up, and defend that Constitution?
Well, you know, you saw today that Dr. Hill told the truth when Ambassador Bolton has sold the truth. And that's a big difference in terms of how you view your constitutional obligations. I think everyone, staffers, as you alluded to before, Lawrence, we've all taken this oath, and the day will come when you have to do the hard thing. And what we saw today was some people who did the hard thing and at substantial risk to their careers, a substantial risk to their place for continued employment, future employment in a Republican administration, standing up to the President of the United States. We saw the other day Lieutenant Colonel Vindman testify about the threats that he feels and the pressure his family feels. So these witnesses are going on the line to do a very simple thing, which is to be fact witnesses, to explain what they heard, what they saw. And I think the thing that today's hearing added, it was even more direct connection between President Trump himself and the scandal and the corruption here. And I think that's going to be a powerful, factual element of the case that will go to the Judiciary Committee.
Congresswoman Demings, what was it like on the committee when you discovered that there was a witness who actually heard the president's voice on the phone in a phone call that at that time you had no idea happened. There was no evidence delivered. Gordon Sondland had not told any of you about that phone call. And here you have a witness to the Gordon Sondland phone call who can tell you what was actually said. That was one of the big discoveries of this investigation. What was it like when you landed on that?
You know, that's absolutely right, Lawrence. But I have said all along that I believe the biggest witness in this entire investigation has really been the president himself. When you read the readout from the call that he had on July 25th. But as you know, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, day after day, have talked about that there was no firsthand knowledge, no direct knowledge. It was second and third hand information. And then along comes Mr. Holmes. That information was quite powerful, but also quite baffling that a U.S. ambassador would use his, as you've already indicated, unsecured cell phone to call the president of the United States and have that conversation in front of Mr. Holmes and other staffers. But it was the additional evidence and information and testimony that we needed.
And Joyce Vance, Gordon Sondland has gone back to his job as ambassador to the European Union. Some people are surprised at that he hasn't resigned now that he's in what appears to be open conflict with the president, or even that the president hasn't fired him. But another way of looking at that is Gordon Sondland, as condemning as his testimony was, at many points in his testimony, seemed to be shading it, seemed to be leaning it as much to favor the president as possible. There could be a lot more things that Gordon Sondland knows that he didn't say, and Donald Trump might know that he didn't say those things.
That seems really likely to me. Something that surprised me about Gordon Sondland's testimony was that there was very little contrition. He seemed almost proud of what they had done and what they had accomplished. And it was hard to get an assessment of whether that was just a businessman, not a career diplomat, who simply didn't understand the contours of the work that he was involved in, or if something else was going on there. But you hit on the key point, which is the president, who has been looped into this entire sort of effort abroad this week with testimony ranging from Mr. Holmes to others who've given him a personal link in. He's the one who knows what these people know that they're not telling us. And so he may have a favorable view of Sondland. Sondland may have to have a 3.0 version of his testimony at some point to get the full truth out if he's inclined to go there. But one thing that we can be certain of is that if any of these absent witnesses, if Ambassador Bolton or Secretary Pompeo had things to say that were helpful to the president, that established that the president wasn't guilty of what's being bandied about this week, those witnesses would have probably been driven straight up to Capitol Hill by President Trump himself so that they could testify. The fact that those witnesses are absent is the best guarantee that we have at this point that Trump is right in the thick of this.
And Ron Klain, what do you see as a possible time estimate of how long it would take for this case to get to the Senate as an impeachment trial in the Senate?
Well, I think the excellent work that Congresswoman Demings and the other people on the Intelligence Committee have done lays the factual predicate for articles of impeachment in the House Judiciary Committee. But now she's going to have to put on her other hat and go to that committee. And the committee has an important job to do here. They have to take all the facts that have been laid out and put it in a legal context. You start to hear Republicans today make this argument, well, Trump's defenses are all gone. Yeah, he did it. Yeah, but it's not illegal. It's not really impeachable. And I know you got Professor Tribe on later on to talk about this, but I think this is the next phase, Lawrence, and hopefully that will get done, between Thanksgiving and the end of the year, so we can take this powerful factual evidence about the crimes our president committed and frame it up into the legal consequences for having committed those crimes.
Congresswoman Val Demings, we're going to be watching as the action shifts to your other committee, the Judiciary Committee. We, of course, will always want you to join us whenever you can. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Joyce Vance, Ron Klain, thank you for starting us off also. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.